For years, I used an old Rockler dust collector to pull smoke and fumes from my laser engravers. It worked, but it was loud, it was bulky, and the motor finally burned up. Well, not literally, but it actually gave out. In this video, I'm replacing it with an AC Infinity CLOUDLINE Pro S6 and hooking it up to my xTool P2. Eventually, the system's going to serve both laser engravers and our UV printer. But first, I want to see just how well it works. Okay, I'm going to walk you through what I'm working with here. This is the back of my xTool P2. Right next to it, with a bunch of crap piled on it, is my ULS laser. I use a 4-inch exhaust hose. Normally, it's connected to both lasers at once through this Y connector. And it runs pretty much the length of my shop, which, if you recall, is a 3-car garage. So it's approximately 30 feet long. This isn't the full length, so this 4-inch hose, if we cruise all the way along its length, goes about, I would say, 20 to 25 feet. If you go from the back of the laser, down the cabinet, down the wall, along the doors, and finally exiting here, which is the best place I could find to drill a hole in my wall and exit the exhaust to the outside. And then I had it set up to go to this old Rockler dust collector because that's what I had. And so I literally just had it set up like that for years. Actually, through 2 workshops, I used that system and it worked fine, but it finally burned up. So I replaced it with this purpose-built inline fume extractor. All right, and you will notice the CLOUDLINE Pro S6 that I'm using here is the 6-inch version of this fume extractor. They have a smaller 4-inch, and I recognize I am immediately reducing it to a 4-inch hose intake and output. However, I chose a 6-inch version after a little research because the larger fan's still going to move more air with less restriction and give me better performance overall. One of my concerns in this process is that I am going to be hooking this up to a UV printer that is completely indoors inside the shop. And I have heard that some of those UV fumes are not too friendly. So point is, I want as much fume and smoke extraction as possible. It was explained to me that this version would move more air than the 4-inch version, even with the immediate reduction in diameter. Earlier you saw me taking everything out of the box that came with the fume extractor. Most of those packages were a variety of mounting straps, screws, brackets, zip ties. I didn't use any of those. It also came with a remote, which I'll touch on in a minute. And it came with 2 metal band clamps that were 6-inch band clamps. What I'm opening here were additional items that I purchased. I will put a link below. And these are the reducers, the 6-inch to 4-inch reducer. This will allow me to hook a 4-inch hose to either end of the 6-inch fume extractor. So my plan with the 6-inch metal band clamps was to use them to attach these reducers to the fume extractor. Now it came with 2 6-inch band clamps. I didn't realize it came with 2 6-inch band clamps, so I had actually purchased these right here, which I do not need anymore, but they're so cheap, I'm just gonna keep them for, I don't know, something later on that is 6 inches in diameter and needs to be clamped. Before I move on with connecting the reducers, I wanted to address the remote situation. So it came with the remote, which you see me holding here, and it came with this long cable, which to me isn't really a remote. I mean, it is a remote, but it's connected. It's not a wireless remote, which I think is what we've come to expect these days. However, this isn't a big deal for my situation. Just want you to be aware, if you are looking at this unit, the remote is not wireless. You may be asking yourself, I wonder why he didn't care that the remote was not wireless. And it's simply because the way I had my old dust extractor / fume extractor hooked up was to plug it directly into this power switch. And that way I could just turn it on and off. I turned the switch on at the dust collector and it stayed on. I turned this switch on and off when I needed it. This fume extractor works the same. Whatever I set this remote at, it stays that way. Anytime the unit gets power, if I have it set on level 7 of 10, it comes on at level 7 of 10. And as you can see here, it works quite well because it started to blow everything off of my workbench. It's also very quiet. I like it. We'll touch on that more in just a minute. Now's where I have to confess that my whole band clamp plan failed. I reverted to duct tape. So I'll explain why. The metal band clamps, although we've all used them for different things, they put a ton of pressure onto hoses and cables and they can hold things quite securely. Because these reducers were all metal, it did not put enough pressure on them to come close to keeping it tight on the reducer. When I cinch it down tight with a screwdriver or nut driver, I could slide the reducer right off. So I had to resort to duct tape. Now I had some black Gorilla duct tape that I would pretty much use for everything, and honestly, black would have looked better. Not that appearance is important. But a little research told me that you specifically wanted to use all-weather duct tape, not because this is going to be out in the elements, but because the adhesive, which you can see there, is quite good, because the adhesive will not deteriorate over time. So this will remain sealed, because to me it's important not just to keep the reducer on, but to also be as close to an airtight seal as possible. So I don't know, I probably could have used the black Gorilla tape, but whatever. You saw me put the first one on. I did it in one continuous piece because of the strange curvature of the reducer and how it meets up with the fume extractor. I did realize that doing a few small pieces worked much better. That is all that was necessary for the prep. Now it's time to install it. You can see here about 6 feet from the end of the exhaust exit where it exits the workshop to the outside. I already had a connector where I was connecting 2 pieces of hose. So all I did is remove this rockler connector, and that's right where I installed the new fume extractor. With both ends attached, this is me reminding myself to tell you that it's important to note there's an arrow on top of the fume extractor, and it shows you which direction the airflow goes. In this picture, it is from right to left, so I have it installed correctly. Here is that switch I was telling you about. I just plug an extension cord into this. It's got its own on-off switch, separate from the whole power strip. So I think, yes, I plugged the extension cord into here. This is plugged into the fume extractor. And as soon as I apply power, I have the fume extractor set on level 10 of 10. So set at its highest setting. It has a nice slow start. So right now it's running. I cannot hear it running. I've got the audio on with no microphone. Let's listen. You can see there, I do not even have the remote hooked up. Once I had the settings set, it kept it in its memory somehow. I don't need our microphone on, but you can hear me talking 2 feet away from this thing at full speed. Beautiful. All I had left was a function check. I need to make sure there was good draw out of the xTool P2. I wanted to make sure there was a good draw without the laser's internal exhaust fan running. So right now there's no power to the laser. I lit some incense, thinking this was probably the safest way to create smoke in the workshop. And I turned on the fume extractor. And I watched the smoke. And sure enough, as I told you before, it has a slow start. So as that thing is winding up, you can see it's starting to draw it in. And now I would say it's probably at full speed. And there's just a steady suction of the smoke, which is exactly what I wanted to see. Very smooth, very wispy, very consistent. I think this is a success. Next thing I did was an actual engraving. I had a law enforcement plaque order in the queue, so I started engraving on this piece of mahogany. As you can see, you can barely see the smoke being drawn out, even though quite a bit of smoke is being generated. And that's a good sign, exactly what I want to see. The xTool P2's internal exhaust fan is working to extract the smoke, as well as the new fume extractor. They're working in conjunction and doing a fantastic job removing all the smoke. I couldn't smell anything in the workshop, which is important to me because I'm also going to be using this in the future to be extracting the fumes out of our UV printer. So overall, fantastic, fantastic success. I'm very happy the way this worked out. I'm very happy with this extractor. I would definitely do it again. Thanks for watching. Please like, please subscribe. If you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you next time.